Hey friends, welcome back to Witch Church. It's Mal. If you're listening, welcome back to the podcast. If you're watching, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I've got a treat for y'all today because we are finally continuing my Asteroid Goddesses series. And if you've been listening along the past year or so, you know I had Bear River on the podcast to talk about Vesta. And then I had Louise Eddington on the podcast to talk about Ceres. I'll link both of those episodes down below. But today is a very special treat because I have one of my favorite astrologer friends with me on this episode, Denise Ulett, who is a relationship astrologer. And I just thought she would be the perfect one to talk about Juno. As we'll learn, Juno is the wife of Zeus, and Juno's placement in your natal chart has a lot to do with relationships and partner dynamics, and even the partner you will end up choosing, or the partners you tend to, sort of label as your type. Okay, that is very Juno. But also Denise and I go into sort of challenging this traditional label of Juno as the planet of marriage, or I should rather say asteroid of marriage. And we go into questioning that, and we wonder if Juno could evolve in her meaning as society evolves in its sort of relationship dynamics, and how we label ourselves and label our relationship dynamics. And as marriage rates sort of go down, and we have that Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sagittarius generation kind of changing things up when it comes to marriage. We're wondering Juno's relationship to things like E&M, polyamory, even a person who doesn't wish to get married at all. What could Juno mean in your chart? So it's a really interesting conversation. I hope you learn a little bit more about your relationship style. And even listening to Denise's stories with her own life, she shines a lot of light on our relationship challenges, but also the gifts that relationships can give us. So let me tell you a little bit more about Denise. We actually met this year in Tucson at the Organization for Professional Astrology's iAstrologer conference. That was back in, I want to say May 2022, and Denise and I hit it off. We've been friends ever since, and I just really adore her. And here's Denise's bio, just to get a little snippet of who she is before we pop into the episode. So Denise Ulett is a certified relationship astrologer devoted to helping people improve the most important relationship they have of all, the one with themselves. Fascinated by the interplay between Mars and Venus, Denise has given lectures on romantic chemistry and loves to parse out various elements that make relationships click or not. She has been a member of OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology, and also ISAR, the International Society for Astrological Research, and loves to create unique ways to bring people together and celebrate astrology in person or online. Denise is located in the Los Angeles greater area, and keep an eye out for her kind of popping off in the next few years. I think her philosophy about relationship astrology is really special. I recently received a forensic relationship astrology reading from her, where she helped me move past sort of a past relationship that had still kind of been on my mind, with the way it, brought up certain things within my own internal emotional world. So know that relationship astrology isn't just about, is this person I'm with now, are they right for me? It can also be about healing the past. This relationship was a disaster. Why? Guys, my mom just called me. We're just going to ignore that. Okay. So that is the episode. I'm so excited for y'all to meet Denise. I'll have all of her information in the show notes. Comment below if you're watching on YouTube your Juno placement, how you're relating to Juno. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, give me a comment. It really helps my YouTube channel grow. I'm manifesting 1,000 followers in this next year. Help me out, my friends. All right. Lots of love to you. Let's get into the episode. I wanted to start on, before I even go into your story with relationships, because I'm very interested in hearing about how your journey kind of led you to relationship astrology. And we are talking about Juno. Juno is this relational goddess. But I just wanted to tell the listeners, me and Denise are synastry is kind of crazy because ironically we have Juno conjunct. You have Juno at 23 degrees Sagittarius. I have Juno at 27 Sag. Then it gets crazier because your Capricorn sun is on my Capricorn Venus pretty much exactly. And then your Venus in Pisces is exactly on my Saturn in Pisces. So maybe we should get married, but
I think so.
I think that's what the stars are telling us.
Yes.
Our
We have a long-term committed relationship. It looks like that's going to happen. Yes.
we do.
It's
And
just beginning.
yeah, it's blossoming now, but I think that our relational synastry is so crazy, like interesting, and our whole dynamic between us has been relationship healing. You recently gave me a reading about a past relationship that was extremely healing, and we've had conversations about your past relationships, so I really feel like we're meeting each other in this lifetime to help each other, find our person or whatever. But yeah, that's how I kind of wanted to introduce you, and now I want to give the mic to you, Denise, and thank you so much for coming on. And I want to hear, or I guess the listeners would definitely want to hear a little bit more about your journey with astrology, because I know you started to dive in to astrology around the time of your divorce, right? So
Correct. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's almost like your relationship astrology interest started at kind of a weird time when a relationship was breaking down. So if you feel comfortable, I want to know about that a little bit more.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much, Mal, for inviting me to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So this is such a treat. And I didn't realize we had that much going on in our chart. So wow, it's hilarious that you pointed that out. Yeah. So So in 2002, I was 33 years old and I was getting divorced. I had two kids, and I thought to myself, how in the world, I was raised in a very religious family. I didn't date in high school or college. You meet your person, you get married, da da da. So here I am, and I'm a Capricorn. I don't like all this commitment, very, very much. But, life happens, right? And so I very much found myself struggling for something to help me understand what happened between me and this other person. We were connected in so many ways, but we were disconnected in so many others. And, what I came across right away is that you start to realize the power of astrology is that it's a tool to understand yourself. And for me to get married so young, I didn't understand myself and my needs. And my partner was very young too. So it my great mission now is for everybody to understand that the most important relationship, the most, where you suffer the most in your intimate relationships is in your intimate relationship with yourself. So if you don't know yourself, how in the world can you expect to connect with a whole other human being who either does or doesn't know themselves? You know what I mean? And so, so that started this 20 years I've been studying. And it is funny that you said that it's an interesting time to be, to get into astrology is when you're getting divorced, but that's when most people start looking for answers, is when something is wrong or they've had a problem. So it seemed kind of like a natural start. Fast forward this to 20 years later, I'm just ending another long-term relationship. And you would think I've been studying relationships this whole time. What you'd think I'd learn, but I have been learning. And you realize, a lot of things. And so what I think is funny is when I put my website up, my sweet sister-in-law, who's known me all these years or whatever, seen all my ups and downs with my relationships or whatever, saw that I put on there that I was a relationship astrologer. And she's like, she's a Sagittarius, so she doesn't mince words. She's like, I'm sorry, Denise, but you are a relationship astrologer? And I'm like, exactly. Exactly. You study what you need to know. You know what I mean? And I feel like it also gives me empathy. Anybody I talk to, I've been there. I know what they're feeling, and I know how you can use a chart to justify a relationship. And I can see what energy cycles through the relationship, and I just feel so lucky that I've had the opportunity to I went through Kay Taylor's relationship astrology course. It was 26 weeks long, and just learned how to use the chart to just understand how we all go through cycles and how we can just give each other space in our relationships if we just understand what the other person's going through. So,
Oh my gosh, definitely. And you know what? I love that point you made about astrology has shown you how to know yourself. And that is the most important thing you can have, the tool you can have in going into relationships. And so often we're fed this phrase like you have to love yourself before you can love someone else or before someone else can love you. I don't know if that's necessarily the be all end all truth. The older I get, the more I don't love that, just because I'm kind of discovering that, you know, receiving love from other people can kind of teach you to love yourself. And sometimes a healing relationship can be a part of a self-love journey. However, I feel like we should change that notion of you have to love yourself before you can be in a relationship. It's almost like you have to know yourself
that's where
before
I am.
before
100%.
and that's what you're bringing up for me. Like, even though you're a relationship astrologer and you're a brilliant relationship astrologer, it doesn't mean that people who are, relationship coaches, relationship astrologers, matchmakers, do they have relationships all figured out? No, but it's like our life calling to do this work. Same thing with me and my natal chart stuff, like with my highly sensitive person healing. Like, am I the perfectly healed, highly sensitive person? No, like, no, it's like your space holder is also learning from you, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's the compassion. And we start to see our strengths and weaknesses, and we have compassion, then we can see the strengths and weaknesses in another person and have compassion for them. So, and then it's just funny when you were saying about, why we become astrologers. My South Node, if you're into evolutionary astrology, my South Node is in Libra. I was all about partnership in my past life. And in this lifetime, I'm supposed to learn about independence. And so here I keep wanting to have these relationships, but I need to evolve my concept from my past life of what a relationship is, especially in our modern world. I've had this traditional upbringing, so I'm overcoming my traditional upbringing. You know what I mean? And I'm seeing the way that relationships relate in the real world, and then everybody around me is evolving at the same time too. So we're all in this together.
Totally, totally. And I obviously brought you on to talk about Juno. And if the listeners don't know this yet or haven't realized it yet, Juno is an asteroid that often gets deemed the asteroid goddess that represents marriage. Juno is Zeus's wife, Hera in Roman mythology, and oftentimes is associated with things like marriage, relationships, and how those things show up in your chart. And Denise, I would love to know a little bit more about you and having Juno in Sagittarius and coming from this religious background. Sagittarius can be the sign of like the corrupt priest in a shadow side, right? So I would love to know, just so we can get to know you a little bit better, like, what were you taught about relationships? What were you taught about the person you should, quote unquote, be with? Because I think that is kind of part of Juno in a way. It's like our conditioning about how we should go about relationships versus what we actually want. So tell us more about that.
Right. Well, and I will tell you, Juno was a huge turning point. I've been studying astrology all these years. And not everybody gets into Juno. And I was really focused on the seventh house, and we'll get to that later. But when I understood what Juno was about and its placement in my first house, your first house is your identity, and Juno is the marriage partner. People always want to marry me. Can I tell you this? They see me as marriage material, right? But it's in Sagittarius, am independent. And I also had this huge indoctrination where you save yourself for marriage. So I had no relationship experience. Think about that. How in the world? You know what I mean? And I had an incident where I was no longer, the perfect virgin. So because of, my upbringing, thought I was damaged goods. And I was depressed for about 6 months. I did not go out. And I was like, what am I going to do? I just focused on my studies, Sagittarius, right? And then when I met this person who I ended up marrying, I felt like I appreciated him because he didn't judge me. He was from a completely different background. And that's what Sagittarius is, usually the foreigner. We only lived an hour and a half away, but he might as well have been from the moon, because he was raised with totally like chill hippie parents who were in an open marriage. I found out later, didn't know at the beginning, but it was the 70s, right? He had, hippie parents. I had super lockdown, basically retro 50s style parents. So we were just and it gave me such freedom. Like I could forgive myself, and he didn't judge me, those kinds of things. So those were the good parts about it. But I also had no other experience I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I had no emotional skills. I didn't know how to argue. I didn't know how to, all these things that you learn when you are in relationships before, but you come in as a rookie and you jump straight into a marriage and you have a baby. You know what I mean? Like there you go. Traditional, boom. And that's what my mom jumped right into marriage and a baby right off the bat. So I just was doing exactly what I was programmed to do. But what I have learned from Juno is that, is this expansion. I need to expand my idea of what it means to be in a committed partnership, right? That's what Juno's ruled by Jupiter: expansion, opportunity, all these things. And I don't know how much we want to get into this, but in the first house, it also has to do with what your, perception of what your partner would be like. And I always wanted a big, strong, and I ended up both of my partnerships with big guys who were former athletes. You know what I mean?
Right.
Who just had gusto. And I was like, yeah. And then I thought, we were going to travel and see the world. And, my one partner we did, but the other partner went more the like coach, like to tell people what to do, kind of the boss, so it was just kind of different manifestations of these sporty types, which is funny. The other funny thing is when people see my partners, they're always like, what are you doing with that guy? People never think, their perception of me is that I would not be with someone like that. So this is so funny. There's just so many ways to look at the house placement and the Juno placement, like what house and then what sign the placement is, and how it all merges together to create this picture of what your partner is going to be, or what you need in a partnership. So.
Ooh, this is so juicy. And we'll definitely, for the listeners who are coming along with us on this wild ride, the second half of the episode will definitely go into more details about your Juno placement and the sign and the house, and Denise and I will riff for 5 hours about all of that. But maybe it would be helpful, because something that you said in your own story reminds me of Juno's story herself. And let's discuss the mythology a little bit. Now, I have to say, out of all the asteroid goddesses, the Juno mythology is something that I don't feel completely well versed on, just because I think it might be a reflection of the astrological community as a whole. When we think of Juno, we're just fed, oh, Juno's Zeus's wife, done. And we don't get into like the details. And I think it's so funny that you have Juno in the first house. Your upbringing and meeting your husband, feels very Juno, like this innocent person, this naive, innocent person, then partnering with someone, and also not only being naive and innocent when it comes to like the physical romantic parts of marriage, but also naive to the other parts of marriage that have to do with communication, negotiation, compromise, conflict resolution, team building, like all of that stuff. And I think the Juno mythology does touch on this innocent person now being married to Zeus, who is a very problematic person. No offense, Jupiter. But tell us a little bit about maybe the story of Juno and what it brings up for you and what it makes you wonder about. I think that's a pretty big question, but I'll throw the ball to you, Denise.
And I'm with you. I don't know a whole lot about the mythology. Most of what I know is from Demetra George's, Asteroid Goddesses. So I just did a quick review of it. And, they call her the divine consort, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. Because I, of course, come from the modern age and want her to be the equal. I keep leaning toward the Lilith stuff, which is a whole other thing. But she is, like what you said, the perfect wife. She's completely faithful, which is a Juno concept because, Sagittarius is faith, right? Right. So she's faithful to her partner, who is a big, powerful, and notorious philanderer. So maybe in the beginning, I think they were probably loyal to each other and they used the container of the sacred container of the relationship. And that's what I went into thinking this. Oh, that marriage, because I come from a religion where marriage is a sacrament. It's sacred. And so did she. And a lot of women go into that thinking, okay, I'm in this container with this person. I'm going to do everything I can to keep this going, no matter what happens. And it's interesting in my situation too. My person was a philanderer, but I didn't know. I was super naive. And then what I think that happens in our society is women are faced with this choice. You either break your sacred marriage bond, you know what I mean? With someone, whatever, because your partner isn't playing by the rules anymore. So you either have to go along with it, this cheating spouse or whatever it is, or break your vow, which is something really hard for people to do. But back to the myth, she also represents fertility and all those things, and she also the big part of her story is the shadow side of infidelity. Of fidelity is when you're faced with infidelity, what do you do? And when I think about the sacred container, the word that comes up is anger, because she's got to use anger to defend her sacred container for her family and her marriage, right? And there's a phrase called hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And I would say hell hath no fury like any partner scorned. You know what I mean? Any person scorned is just going to, all that beautiful love they have gets completely flipped. And so there are a lot of retaliation and revenge stories in the Juno myth. And in today's world, I would translate that as like revenge porn, because she literally highs Jupiter up and humiliates him in front of everybody, and Zeus in the Greek myth, Zeus shoots lightning bolts at her and thus begins a giant war. And if you've ever seen any long-term relationships where, like, especially this happens like in European cultures where the wife just puts up with the fact that the husband has a mistress, there's this underlying anger all the time. You know what I mean? And what's crazy about what happens when there's a mistress is that you, the wife, become the other woman. You get put in that almost role. You know what I mean? So there's this competition. And so what ends up happening is in modern society, all the way back to the beginning of time, there's this triangulation and there's this the anger gets misappropriated toward the other woman. When it should be, both of you should be aiming your lightning bolts at at whoever the cheating spouse is. It doesn't matter who it is. Let's take the gender out of it. It's whoever the cheating spouse is. You shouldn't be mad at the person they're cheating with. You should be mad at the person who's cheating.
Yeah. Oh, this is blowing my mind. And also, Juno as just a conversation about the institution of marriage itself. I've been watching a lot of Game of Thrones lately.
Ooh.
Game of Thrones has been a huge part of my Mars retrograde story in a weird way. And the way marriage is depicted in Game of Thrones, I think is actually a lot like what we have experienced for many, many, many lifetimes, which is, I'm about to be pretty binary in my language here. And obviously we can apply this differently to the 21st century, but we're talking about like Game of Thrones time. What is marriage? Marriage is a decision that your parents are kind of making for you in order to either uphold or even increase their political standing. And gender, or the perceived gender of people, acts as like this bargaining tool. And, I'm not saying anything like completely enlightening. I mean, I'm sure many people have made this point, but, marriage is rooted in this sort of misogynistic thing where it's like, okay, the woman is being sold away like she's a prized pig or whatever, a possession, or like she's the best livestock they have on the farm. She's being sold away to maybe a slightly richer family. And now she's being traded for some money, or she has a dowry, or there's always like this exchange of goods and services that go with the woman being the sort of object, quote unquote. And then when you get to the institution of marriage, again, I'm talking in like Game of Thrones time, but I think it could still definitely be applied now because we're still working through, I think, a lot of that past life stuff in 2022. But when you get to the playing field of marriage, now we often do see this Juno Zeus dynamic, not only in heteronormative contexts. Okay, as a queer person, I see the Juno Zeus thing going on in queer relationships too. It's like, the sacrificial lamb who is the Juno archetype, being paired with the philanderer. I like your word. And it brings up this bigger question, I think, about even what women or non-binary people, but I'm sure men have sometimes been put in this position too. Like, what is the sacrifice to be in this commitment? There's safety in marriage because there's privilege in being married, but then what is the sacrifice to enter into this safety? Well, now you're at the beckoning call of your husband, you're cleaning the house, you do all the emotional labor with the kids. That's not sexy, like, so there's so many things that Juno brings up. I wish we talked about her more. I know I just threw a lot at you. Anything that's sticking out?
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, just to touch on the point of like, not only is it her worth as, just it's her worth as a baby maker. She makes more people for the team. You know what I mean? And, so she gives up her freedom, blah, blah, blah. Even in today's society, you know what I mean? Like even fast forward to now, women are starting to inch toward equality. We're educated and all these other things, but we still haven't shed that thing of the majority of that labor goes to whoever the stay-at-home parent is. You know what I mean? Whether that person produced the child or not, whoever, there's always this sacrifice. Somebody has to take care of the kids, or there's two parents, So there's that aspect, the fertility aspect enriches, if you think about it, Um, just, oh my gosh, so many thoughts. The sacrifice. Oh, going back to the sacrifice is that you also are sacrificed, that you are this sexual safety net. You assume that your person is only going to be with you. Well, in this day and age, your person cheats on you, they can bring home a disease. And this in every age, this is possible. There are so many, people that for whom their life was threatened because their person was outside the marriage, bringing disease to them. So that's a huge thing in any community, in the modern times, you know what I mean? So again, what it really comes down to is this thing about truth, which is what I think is so fascinating about Juno. Juno is about truth, right? She's, you've gone through the Scorpio phase where you've dug out the truth, and then in the Sagittarius Jupiter phase, you're spreading that information everywhere. And so it's the breaking of the truth. You know what I mean? It's being dishonest is what causes the rage. You know what I mean? That's the long-term space-time continuum karmic, because Juno has a lot to do with your karma too. That's the problem. If you are lying in your relationship, you are creating a huge karmic debt.
Yep.
So think of all these people, who knows in my past life, I have South Node conjunct Jupiter and Pluto. So, who knows what my past life was about, what I'm coming in to learn, who knows, maybe I'm making up my karmic debt now. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many elements when you look at like when people talk about marriage, your marriage partner being your biggest decision, it changes your whole life. So that's why I was really into it, and why I love to look at Juno and see what is it that you're getting yourself into.
Yes. Oh gosh. And the thing about Juno, so we're talking about Juno in the chart, bringing up themes around marriage, how we've been conditioned to think about marriage, our past lives, being married, and the trauma and the karma that we still carry from that 100%. I mean, you don't believe me, I mean, I won't force my beliefs on you, but like the amount of married women I talk to about their resentment, about the emotional labor that they have to do in marriage and not receiving what they need back. And also, I think I'm talking about a heteronormative context, but we could apply this to all contexts, like another partner having no idea how to fulfill the emotional needs of their partner, right? So we have that
Right.
kind of thing going on. Then, because Juno was married to Zeus, a notorious playboy, let's say, we have this commitment, fidelity, betrayal subtone, subcategory of Juno, and how that may kind of apply to life in some way. Now, I wouldn't be surprised though if now in the 21st century, it's not to say we can no longer be cheated on. I mean, certainly infidelity unfortunately happens all the time. But now there's this new context called polyamorous ethical non monogamy. And I would argue that those people who feel like ethical non monogamy is part of their identity and they have multiple partners, I would still be like interested in seeing their Juno because I would think they would have a very strong Juno because in this lifetime they're rewriting the story of what a partnership should look like, quote unquote, and also rewriting the story of maybe all my needs cannot get met by one person. This is not me saying like making a statement about how polyamory is better than monogamy. I think it truly depends the chart and it depends the person. But I think there's also something like that comes in, with Juno.
100%. And I do see like within I'm on the dating apps and I see all these people that are ENM, ethically non-monogamous. The only way that works is if they're 100% truthful, going back to the Sagittarian concept of, the truth. They have to know, or they just make a deal that like, okay, just don't tell me. Or there's parameters set up, there's deal making. And this is something that also goes all the way back to the Juno myth, is about power. There is a power dynamic. And I cannot tell you how many guys don't say they're ethically non-monogamous, I can't even say non-monogamous, because really inherently that's what marriage is about, monogamy in this definition, if we're going to use it, right? I mean, it's evolving, there are open marriages, but I'm just saying typically, like back to the myth, it was monogamy, it was one person, right? How many people don't say they're ethically non-monogamous, but I'll go on a date with someone, they'll be like, oh, well, my best friend. I can tell you 3 or 4 people who I'll go down the road, maybe 1 or 2 dates, and I realize you really are emotionally involved with this person, either your ex or somebody, whatever, but you're just not having sex with them anymore. So that's what you're looking for in this next thing. You know what I mean? But the whole package is the sex and the emotional fidelity when we go back to this Juno concept. So anyway, just going back to if we would all tell the truth. Let's just go back. Can we go all the way back to the Bible here? There are two commandments. One, thou shalt not commit adultery, and one shall not covet thy neighbor's spouse. 2 different things.
Wow. Okay, that is
2 out of 10. 2 out of 10 are about this thing. So again, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. You know what I mean? Like no matter what form it's going to be in modern times, there
right.
is still this concept of property. There's still this concept
Right. And
of lying.
it,
Yes.
it's so interesting that, yeah, I think there's probably many people who have too much unexamined conditioning to really admit to themselves, oh, maybe I am, more polyamorous, ethically non-monogamous, but then it turns into being unethically non-monogamous or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, and if I may speak to this point, talking about polyamory, and of course, obviously, the Mormons have gotten crap about bigamy for all these years. But there was a book that came out in the '90s, and I bought a copy for every woman I know, and it was called The Red Tent. And it was about the story of Jacob, and he had 4 wives. Are you familiar with this story? The red tent? Okay. And each of those women played a role. One was the person he had babies with. One was the person he ran the business with. One person was like the artist poet for whom he could express his deepest thoughts. And I forgot what the other one, I think one was just like the one who kept everything organized. And if you think about in modern times, we have multiple long-term relationships or serial daters. Each of those people would have been a wife. You can see, like in Hollywood back in the day, people got married 5, 6, 7 times because you couldn't date. You had to marry that person you were dating. You know what I'm saying? So you always wonder, like, why these Hollywood, why did Elizabeth Taylor get married 8 times? Well, in her world, you had to marry the person you're dating. You know what I'm saying? Now we don't even bother. We're just like serial dating. I've been with this person. Well, in my case, I was married for 10 years and I dated this other person for 12 years. But I used to say to the person I dated, I'm more married to you in my heart than I ever was to the person I was legally married to. It didn't matter what the legal part was. And I've had a way harder time with the second situation than the first one, even though I had kids. It's just all has to do with, what's really going on here.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to say too, Denise, is that like, even if some of the listeners, like they're still grasping the actual mythology of Juno and Zeus and, what that could mean in their chart, I think a really good semi-modern day example, Demetra George uses her chart all the time, in her Asteroid Goddess books, but Jackie Kennedy has a very strong Juno signature in her chart. And in a way, Jackie Kennedy does, marry a Zeus-like figure, who does have these rumored affairs and with a very prominent actress, Marilyn Monroe, and there's something there too about that story if some of the listeners are wanting to grasp a more modern thing that we've seen play out on the news or whatever. Like, that's something that I feel like is a good example of Juno.
That's excellent. It's also an excellent example of how she wants to stay connected to the power.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
She's not going to give up her spot. She'll put up with, happy birthday, Mr. President, because she's the queen. You know what I mean? She is Mrs. President. You know what I mean? So again, it goes back to those sacrifices we make emotionally, psychologically, whatever it is to keep whatever our Juno concept is in our mind. You know what I mean? Of what kind of partner we are, what kind of partner we want, and denial is a huge coping mechanism. Many other things. A lot of people just learn to look away.
Yes.
Not cause trouble. So
totally. And let's definitely, so I think we have good grasp on like the story that the narrative of Juno, but tell me maybe a little bit more about what you think about when you're sitting down with a client or just looking at anybody's chart. Even, we talked about the people that we meet on dating apps being our guinea pigs. So we're sitting down with the chart of a future first date, and we're looking at Juno. What do you think Juno really signifies? And you made this point too, Denise, about being a little obsessed with the 7th house, which is the house of relationships. How do you feel like Juno is kind of different than the 7th house? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, just to refresh to your viewers, just for those, until I knew about Juno, I was always focused on the 7th house. So the first house is ourself, our rising sign. Our first house is ourselves, how we see ourselves, now the world sees us. And then the 7th house is other, and other is committed partnership. So it's very similar to Juno in that, about its commitment. Typically, sometimes people think it's legal, but it's not just romantic partners, it's business partners. I think we can expand this to like best friends. I've seen that in other literature. And I'm even more and more I'm reading about with Juno is that, and I think this applies to the 7th house, is one-on-one relationships like therapists and clients, teachers and gurus, that kind of one-on-one. That's what we're talking about, is you self and other in an intimate of some sort relationship, especially like with business, you are in it with this person, right? And for example, I very much focus on when I'm talking to someone about their 7th house, the element, because I'm like, that is what really describes your relationship. So for me, it's Gemini. So I have an air sign. I need to be able to talk to my partner. Intellectual stimulation is very important. It just so happens that my Juno is in the opposite you know what I mean, is in Sagittarius, is in a fire sign, which actually kind of works, but it has a lot to do with my identity. So I need a smart partner, so this flows, who I can talk about big stuff with. You know what I mean? And go places and do things with. And that echoes both my seventh house and also my Juno. So I'm fortunate that mine kind of goes together. But some people who have very wildly different, you know, expectations, you know, for how their partnerships are going to go. The other thing about the seventh house is with that elemental energy is that you look at the mutable, the fixed, and the cardinal, right? Do you have a take charge relationship? Do you have a changeable relationship? You know, and do you have a fixed or focused relationship? And mine is immutable air sign, right? And it's in Gemini, which is 2. I've had 2 very long-term relationships. And the quality, the essence of how my relationships operate is they were always on, off, on, off. So I always think of Gemini as AC/DC current, you know, on, off, right? Whereas
Yes.
Aquarius would be fixed, right? An Aquarius air sign relationship would be a fixed focus. You'd be devoted, best friends, probably, you know. There might be lightning bolt, like sudden changes in your relationship, but an Aquarius seventh house is pretty much committed. You know what I mean? And then a Libra seventh house, it rules the seventh house, right? You know what I mean? And it's all about balance and fairness and power dynamics and, you know, all those kinds of things. And so it's just so interesting. That's where you get how the relationship operates. But and this is where I made the big switch over to Juno. Juno is the partner. What kind of partner you need and what kind of partner you oftentimes, because there's a power dynamic, if you don't have it in you, you're looking for someone to help you be that thing. So there's a power dynamic shift that I don't have quite completely figured out in my life, but it's in the book. It talks about, you know, in Demetra's book about how we give up our power to our partners, stuff that we don't integrate in ourselves, we're looking for in someone else. So anyway.
Yeah.
Did that describe the seventh versus the Juno thing? I don't know if that described it enough, but
Oh, well, something
we can keep going.
well, and maybe I could touch on this considering right now, as we speak, December 8th, we're a day after, you know, the Gemini full moon. It was a little bit of a rocky one. Juno was actually in a T square with that full moon. So Juno's in Pisces right now. And if we really want to take like the Juno in Pisces kind of higher self kind of approach, I'm thinking about, yeah, like a relationship is a power dynamic in a lot of ways. And we could talk about how relationships often, you know, have power dynamic issues, whether that be with money or even sexual dynamics, sure. But also, something that makes me think, you know, what's underneath power might even be surrender and vulnerability. And when you trust someone and when you say, I need you know, like, I want you in my life, but I need you in my life, like, that is a vulnerable thing. And that is also kind of a surrender of your ego and of your power to say, like, okay, my heart is open. I do want a relationship, or I do want someone, or I do want to be in love, or whatever. Like, how many of us have a chip on our shoulder and say, like, I'm not looking for a relationship, or I just want something casual, or I don't care about this person, like, whatever, it was just a hookup. Like, yeah, I mean, that could be true, especially depending on your Juno, but also, like, how much of that is us keeping our power and not surrendering to the vulnerability of being in union with another. Um, does that make sense, Denise?
Oh, totally. And if I could just take this the next step further, is I just want your listeners to know that we are all collectively right now, as of this date, December 8th, all of us are in this dynamic between the sun and Sagittarius as our beliefs, right? Versus the moon and Mars and Gemini. You know, if you think of Gemini, it's facts, right? And do we have the courage, Mars in Gemini, retrograde, you know, whatever, to face the facts, right? So we're in this dynamic, right? In the T square to Juno, which is our deepest unconscious feelings about relationships, you know, Piscean, right? It's the 12th house, the unconscious, right? So we have this opportunity to face the facts of what our relationships have been like. No matter what house this falls in for you, you know what I mean? There's this T squared to Juno. Everybody is comparing their beliefs and their, the day to day, the actuality of their lives, how this works with their unconscious beliefs of how Juno and Pisces works for all of us. And these relationships aren't just marriage, they're friendships, business, you could apply this on a mundane level, is Juno is partnership. So it's just crazy that literally we did not know when you picked this day that there would be this T square to Juno and it would be so important.
I can't tell you, like, I have not heard that many people say that, this last full moon of 2022, everybody's been saying, oh, it's conjunct Mars, it's conjunct Mars, it's conjunct Mars, which is true, but also I can't tell you how much relationship stuff has been coming up in my life and in my clients' lives and in my friends' lives. And oh my gosh, I feel like there's this huge illumination right now when it comes to how we're showing up in relationships, our karmic contracts with even past life shit. Like, I keep talking about past lives, but
Yeah.
I truly think that right now it's almost an opportunity to purge a pattern that we may have been repeating for hundreds of years. We don't even aren't even conscious of it, and it's like, all right, how do I how do I move past this? Or for me, something that's been coming up for a while, because you have your sun at 27 Capricorn, my Venus is at
Yeah.
27 Capricorn. So we both have Pluto kind of sitting on Venus, my Venus and your sun. And,
Mhm.
something for me that has been like really, really deep wound is my fear of abandonment. I'm so afraid of abandonment. I feel like blah blah blah. Everybody's abandoned me. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever, mommy issues, daddy issues. I all of my breakups have kind of been really abrupt endings where I feel abandoned, and Venus on my or Pluto on my Venus in the mix with this Juno stuff of this full moon, like, wow, have I really been able to see my abandonment wounds and be able to understand them and kind of be able to try to not necessarily fix them, but just understanding, I think, breeds a lot of peace.
Totally.
And that's been something, like you said to me maybe a couple weeks ago, you said repression is the hardest part, and it really is that vibe right now. Any of your own stuff?
Oh, totally. Well, just going back to just exactly what you said, that's why it takes courage to face what you're professing, that courage to face what you are repressing. That's what I'm saying about these thoughts and our thought patterns. And going back to this thing with Pluto on your Venus is it's a form of death, right? And Pluto represents death. Pluto's
Yeah.
on my sun, so my ego is, you know what I mean? I've gone through this transformation of my ego. You're going through your values in relationship. And what I think is funny, what you said about abandonment is, what do we say when someone abruptly cuts us off? It's called ghosting, right? They ghost us. So it is a form of death. You can't contact this person. They block you or whatever it is. That is such a psychic blow. That's so unfair. And this goes back to this unfairness with the infidelity and all these other things. Cutting someone off from what they thought was going on and then lying, you know what I mean? That's just not facing the facts. And all is going back to having the courage to face our thoughts and feelings with the moon and Mars and Gemini, right now. So yeah, it's some deep stuff. Yeah.
I'm so glad. No wonder I pulled the Two of Cups this morning. No wonder.
Oh, okay, tell me about the Two of Cups.
Well, the Two of Cups in the tarot is our capacity to open our hearts to each other. And healing can't happen when our heart chakra is closed, because that also means we're not willing to be vulnerable. And it brings up, like, the phrases like, our secrets are what make us sick and all of that stuff. So, Two of Cups is like, wow, the catharsis that's going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that this discussion is somehow cathartic to some of our listeners. And what do you think, Denise? Are you in the mood to maybe talk a little bit more about when it comes to Juno in natal astrology? Should we maybe go through Juno in the signs and the houses and kind of riff a little bit and see if we can give the listeners some insight as to what kind of partner they could be looking for, and maybe some subconscious/conscious challenges that could arise with relational stuff. And we'll maybe go through the 12 signs slash the houses, and we'll try to kind of meld them together in a way that makes sense, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, that's so perfect. I did want to just one last little thing to conclude that conversation about like what's going on right now and how this works in a chart before we get to the natal specifically. Please. Is again, back to how uncanny it is that you pick today. You know what I mean? So in my chart today, right, the sun is in the first house. I'm Sag rising, and it's on my Juno. Okay, the sun is on my Juno, right? Seventh house of my house of relationships has the moon and Mars, right? All of it is squaring, right? Juno and Pisces, and Juno and Pisces is exactly on my Venus in Pisces. So I'm saying is, when you guys, just to all your listeners out there, take the time to figure this stuff out. You will just understand more and more. And it's on your Saturn in Pisces, right? This square to your Saturn in Pisces. So you are thinking, I would say, would you say about commitment? How would you say that this Mars and moon square with the sun, how do you feel? Because it's hitting your Saturn, it's hitting my Venus. So it's pretty obvious for me.
God. Yeah, I can't. Oh my God, you're calling me out right now.
I'm sorry, but I didn't want to skip this because it's just too pertinent. The fact that we're having this conversation today and it's exactly conjuncting your Saturn and my Venus.
Well, ridiculous. I'll give you the tea because it's you, and our Junos are conjunct and our Mercuries are conjunct. So I just have no choice but to spill my guts to you. But there's an honesty I feel like I can really have with you. But speaking of fear of abandonment, right now, I recently I've gone on a handful of dates with this girl, and I just really, really like her. Like, haven't felt this way about someone in a while. However, there's already a timeline that's presented with this dynamic because she is going to be leaving Chicago to go to school and travel in the next like 4 to 6 months or whatever. So I'm at the crossroads right now with my abandonment issues. Like, I'm like, all right, this is already gonna end in a way where I feel abandoned, but does it have to end like that? Like, is this the opportunity to change the story? Because we've been conditioned to think, okay, if a relationship isn't leading to something super long-term or marriage, it's not worth it. You're cheating yourself. You're not valuing yourself, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, but what if this shorter term relationship with the right amount of communication and vulnerability could be really healing? And what if eventually this is the person that, am I going to end up with them really long term? No, probably not. But what if we can go from relationship and transition into friendship? And this is the first time that I could have a relationship story where it ends, but it doesn't result in abandonment, and that's been a huge thing that I've been marinating on. Now, granted, stay tuned, listeners, because I might just cut it off now. Like I might just be like, nope, not worth the grief, not worth the pain of really, giving myself to this thing that isn't going to be long term. But I don't know. So that's actually my Juno story right now.
That is amazing. And everyone has a Juno story right now too. And what I think is what we're talking about is the consciousness level. You are consciously talking about, there's going to be a change however many months down the road. How can you consciously navigate your relationship at a distance, but your eyes are open. It's not like it's just hitting you. You know what I mean? Like, you're not being naive. You are consciously choosing this. And this is what they talked about with the Pluto and Libra generation. This is where conscious uncoupling came in. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Gwyneth Paltrow was a Libra. Isn't it funny? And she's like the person we say coined that phrase. So, we have to remember that we're in the context of all this. You know what I mean? Of like the context of this relationship in your 20s. And that's what's so hard is in your 20s, there's so much development that has to happen. How could you not give people the space to grow as people? But that's what happened. People got clamped down early and couldn't grow. So I think that's the beauty. Even though this is hard, and this is probably a stepping stone lesson for you, it's going to help you get to that next level when you are ready and the other person's ready for
Yes.
the long-term commitment.
And by the way, why is the divorce rate, what is it, like over 50%? Because so many fucking people are getting married before their Saturn return.
That's exactly it. Thank you, friend. But no one tells you that. No one, it's yes.
Yeah. Guys, you
We
had
know that.
Yeah,
We
no.
think it's common knowledge. Astrologers know. I tell everyone, but
Yeah,
what are you
no.
gonna do?
Exactly. Your childhood was terrible because your parents got married before their Saturn return. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, 100%. Yes, exactly. And I repeated it, and everything. So yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah. You spilled the tea now, Denise. You tell
Oh,
us.
well, I'm just saying is that, I've wrapped up this other relationship. And what I'm saying is this is an opportunity for me to repattern my thinking. You know what I mean? Is that like going forward, I've been totally like anti-relationship. Well, now I'm like, Denise, come on. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
come on.
can I
Yeah.
call you out for a second? I want to put you on blast because, guys, Denise has been doing a lot of like recovering Catholic things lately because she's a relationship astrologer. She's recently been opening up to like where she actually wants to do astrology events and readings. And you've been visiting like sex toy shops and lingerie shops and feeling very liberated with like, how do I want to practice astrology and who do I want to talk to? And that feels Juno in a way. What do you think?
And tying it together. That's funny. Like, I know I'm doing that, but I didn't even put that in with my, okay. So, like I said, I feel like I have this mission that we suffer the most in our intimate relationships. And people are always, because I'm in the dating world, always ask about chemistry. So I'm like, that's it. I'm going to break this down. And I gave a talk in a feminist sex store a while back about Mars and Venus. And we had 90 people sign up and 40 people show up. People are hungry for this information. They want to understand themselves and why, obviously sex is just one piece of the pie in a relationship, but it's a very powerful, going back to the power dynamic, sexual dynamic, power dynamic. And I'm like, let's just cut to the chase. And of course, I'm going to cut to the chase because, I'm Mars and Scorpio. I want to get to the heart of this matter, right? I want to get to the heart of what is going on with people. And if you understand what your sexual needs are, so to me, I'm like on this mission, like everybody, please understand what your Mars is so that you can tell your partner what you need. So at least that part, to me, sex is the glue of your relationship. It's where you're the most vulnerable. It's where the most pain comes from if it doesn't connect correctly, and that you'll give your person the freedom to go if it doesn't click. Why would you imprison somebody the rest of because of a legal agreement when this most essential part of yourself can't be expressed? So anyway, I thought, well, what's the best way to get to people? And I'm like, well, people go to sex stores, you know what I mean? For, sex toy shops to enhance their pleasure in that department. And they do sex ed, events to help people understand their sexuality better. So yes, I did part of our mentorship group. You guys encouraged me to go ahead and where I live now to go around and talk to the stores. I left my card a couple places, but I do think eventually when I get settled into my practice, that is going to be an ongoing part of what I feel is like almost community service. Like, let's find a way to connect with people in the normal world who aren't typically into astrology, help them understand that there's another way to look at this energy that they carry and how you connect with your partner. So
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. This was so good. I needed this conversation. I really did. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Denise. So what do you think? Should we dive into the circle of the zodiac? Do we want to start with Aries or is that too? Yeah, let's start with, okay, so we'll talk vaguely about Juno in Aries and then also the first house, because it's not to say the signs in the houses are exactly the same, but maybe similar vibes. And
Right.
if you don't know where Juno is in your chart,
Mhm.
I know for a fact that you can click the asteroid on astro-charts.com. When you look up your chart there, you can turn on the asteroids and you can turn on Juno. And Juno is the asteroid that looks like a little asterisk and then has the stick. Like, so I don't if that's do you
I
have a
think it
better
looks like a
idea?
sparkler, like a 4th of July sparkler. It's got the little, it's almost like a flower. It's got the spray, like, the line or whatever. And you said, right, the stick that holds it
Yes,
down. So
so
definitely.
that's great. Yeah, take note of where the sparkler symbol is in your chart because that's Juno. Take note of the sign, take note of the house. And if you are a little bit more of an advanced astrologer, take note of the aspects. Do you notice that Juno is on the exact degree of your moon? Do you notice that Juno is exactly opposite your Venus? And just start writing these things down and collecting some data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
particularly if there's a planet conjunct your Juno, it totally informs it. Especially, and then we haven't even gotten to the composite chart, but in the composite chart in your relationship, you can see where you both think of your marriage together and if it's conjunct any. So, I mean, this can go on and on and on. How deep Juno can keep informing you. So, but let's get to the basics. Yes, yes.
Well, yeah, we'll
Yeah,
start with the basics. Okay, so Juno and Aries. I'm getting a vibe of, Aries being the keyword I am. Juno and Aries having a little bit of maybe a juxtaposition between I want to commit, but does commitment mean that I lose my independence? And is there such a thing as committing while also maintaining all of the independent time that I need? Um,
right,
that's kind
right.
of what I get from Juno and Aries. What do you think?
Right. And then if we'll just go ahead and apply, the element and the modality,
Yeah.
it is a cardinal fire sign. Juno has the need to hunt. It has the need, it wants to be inspired. It likes challenges. It's martial because it's ruled by Mars, right? So imagine you're going to need a partner you can spar with. You need a partner who can be intense. You need a partner who can run at your same level, So there is a Martian quality to your marriage relationship. You need somebody who can hang tight with you know? So,
Ye-
and like you said, the position of the first house is self, and then the seventh house is other. So it's really opposite. When you have Juno and Aries, you're really looking out for yourself. Partnership isn't really the first thing on your mind. So you would have to have a partner that would allow you to still be yourself and independent, you know.
Yes. And I also kind of feel like I'm not saying that Juno in Aries, if that they're like inherently non-committal or inherently cheaters or something like that. But I do think for some reason I feel called to say this, like if you're Juno and Aries and you are always finding yourself like kind of doing some shady stuff or just feeling like really closeted or like really like kind of held controlled by a relationship dynamic, like maybe it's not so much about relationships themselves, but maybe it's like the people who really want to control you. And would that be different if your partner gave you, some more freedom?
Right, right. Exactly. That's the key to all of this is
Yeah.
understanding where your partner's coming from too. So very good.
One
Okay,
thing,
so that's Juno and Aries, right? As opposed to Juno in the first house, correct?
yes, yes. And I will say now going into Juno in the first house, a little bit different, like you said, because first house, seventh house are so connected, but I do know someone who has Juno in the first house, literally never, ever, ever single. Like never single. Always, always, always partnered. So, and kind of like what you said, Denise, about that's not you, but how you said early in life, like you considered your identity to be the partner. Especially in your marriage. Like, that feels to me like how is partnership intertwined in the identity?
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I wasn't somebody who dreamed about getting married. I didn't ever want to. It looked like a lot of work to me. However, in partnership, it was important to me to be seen as a good partner because it has to do with myself, my identity. I was the best. I should have been in PR. I mean, I was the perfect wife. I was Juno. I was the perfect wife because I'm like, I'll be damned if I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, so it had a lot to do with my perception of myself. I perceived myself as a good partner. You know what I mean? And it was important to my identity. And then you and I talked about this. The partners I picked, people around me were like, didn't see me with these people. They're like, these people you pick don't seem like the type you would be with, but they don't understand my psychology and they don't understand my astrology. That, I picked these sporty Jupiterian athletic dudes, big Jupiterian dudes each time. You know what I mean? Now, how crazy is that? But I have, Juno in Sagittarius. I like big people.
Yes. Oh
so
my.
anyway, but people's perception of me was like, oh, I wouldn't think you'd be with someone like that.
Yes.
So anyway, Juno in the first house is perception, right? Identity, how you see yourself and who you see yourself with, whether other people see that or not. So
Okay. Love it. Okay, should we go to Taurus and second house?
Yeah, and I want to just go back to your person who's never single. That person who has Juno in the first house needs to be partnered. That's the way they see themselves. You know what I mean? They don't, even though it's an Aries first house, I don't know what their Juno is, but they're always more comfortable in a partnership than being by themselves. So
Totally. Yeah. And that person that I had the example for, she actually is Juno in Libra. So it's
well, then there you go. That's a perfect example.
Yeah. But let's do, okay, so Juno in Taurus. What's your kind of gut feeling about Juno?
Well, and I have a friend who has Juno in Taurus, so I've watched her. She's been married twice. She wants stability.
Okay.
She wants all the luxuries.
Yes.
She's my artist friend I was telling you about. And talk about like whatever. Her Juno is in Taurus and the ninth house conjunct Saturn. Okay, but let's just go back to just Juno in Taurus. She was married to a stockbroker. And then she was married, and people are like, you're an artist, you're married to a stockbroker? Yeah. Then the next person, she was married to a mechanic, but he came from family money in a big, nice house. So she, you know what I mean? So, and both of them, and this is going back to like what the partner looks like, both of her guys, even though they were water signs, looked like Tauruses. They were short, stocky, kind of bullish looking, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's funny. She picked Taurus partners.
They're like short king vibe.
The short king vibe. She did. And her seventh house is in Pisces. So she married a Pisces the first time. She married a Scorpio the second time. So she got water sign energy, but she got the Taurus vibe because they had money. They were stable. They liked that she was an artist. She helped fulfill something for them. You know what I mean? But the Taurus vibe wants all the luxury and the stability and the tradition. I was like, why are you getting married again? She wants that tradition. She wants that bottom line.
Yes. I think of with who's coming to mind. Are you a Real Housewives fan?
I've not watched it.
Oh, okay. There's some Real Housewife fans listening, I know. But Teresa Giudice from Real Housewives of New Jersey recently got remarried. And her wedding was so elaborate for a second marriage, but it kind of reminds me of that vibe. Like, okay, no, like I want the tradition, I want the white dress, etc., etc. Also, something comes to mind. Now, this is more Juno in the second house, but it could apply to Juno in Taurus too. Being attracted to people with ambition, being attracted to like the entrepreneurial kind of visionary, like someone who has a plan or someone who literally does own a business or has some sort of a greater ambition. I feel like the lack of passion would probably be a turnoff for Juno in the second house, because it's like, man, like, what are you living your life for? Like, you don't have anything going on for yourself.
Oh, exactly. And, when you think of it, Taurus is ruled by Venus. They want the finer things. They want the love, the romance, the food, the clothes, the house, the everything. And the second house is your emotional and financial resources. And people are emotionally secure when they're financially secure, usually. Usually that goes hand in hand. So she needs security. Or most people with the Juno and Taurus want a partner they can count on.
Yes. Meanwhile, with Jupiter and Sag, I'm like,
Is
I'm
yours
like,
in the second house?
no, mine's in the sixth house.
Okay, okay,
But
okay. I was gonna
but
say.
yeah, I'm like can't relate. Like I wouldn't. I'm like the finance bros, the tech bros. It just doesn't. It can't.
We should do a chart with like the modern day, like what those people look like in modern society. We'll have to figure it out.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like financial stability. Ew. Let's
that's
go to
that's
Guam.
boring. And that's the
Yeah,
other thing. Back to this kind of boring, unexciting, you
that's
know.
boring. Yes. And yes, yes, exactly. So this is guys, this is my South Node in Taurus speaking. Sorry.
Because you've been there, done that in your past life. You're ready for the deep, intense stuff in this lifetime with your North
E-
Node in Scorpio.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so Gemini. Juno in Gemini. I kind of feel like this is we're meeting in a coffee shop, or we're meeting in like a serendipitous way, or we grab the same book at the bookstore. Like there's some kind of immediate intellectual connection. And really, for Juno in Gemini, the mind is the greatest sex organ, like is the greatest turn on. And I'm thinking about what it truly means to be attracted to someone's mind. That's how I feel about Juno in Gemini. But you also mentioned Gemini being the sign of the twins.
Yeah.
Twos. I wonder if, yeah, a lot of Juno and Geminis, maybe they have two really significant relationships, or maybe there is some interesting dynamics there with like polyamory. I don't
That's
know.
I was
Yeah.
the one person that I know who's Juno and Gemini is exploring her sexuality and thinks she's been bi this whole time. There is a duality. There's a dual nature to this. And I'm not saying that this person is a liar or but I'm just saying it's like there's sort of this devil's advocate, kind of thing going on when there's like always considering the alternative, alternate, there's two sides to every coin. They're the same coin, but it's two sides to every coin. So kind of an interesting thing. But the intellect is the key. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And the a third house Juno. I also associate the third house as like the house of the mind and the house of the narratives that we carry. I mean, the third house can also have to do with like local community. And maybe if you have Juno in the third house, maybe you're more likely to like marry your high school sweetheart, or marry someone from your hometown, or something along those lines.
Totally with you like that. I think, or people maybe later in life come back to a class reunion and they find their person, that kind of stuff. But I also think, this when we do composite charts, wherever you have the sun has to do a lot with what's going on. And I do know that Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston had a son in the third house, and they were very much ran in the same social circles in Hollywood. So the timing of their relationship. So I'm adding that to the third house, having Juno in the third house is you want somebody in that same world that you live in. Small world, not big. I mean, sure they traveled and they did all this other stuff, but they were in a tight social circle of the A-list celebrities. You know what I'm saying? So not everybody can do that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, totally, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Like I would be interested in doing a little bit of a study. Like if you reconnected with a love interest at like a school reunion or a hometown Christmas party or something, and like do you have Juno in the third house?
Right. And especially now with Mars in Gemini retrograde for 7 months. How many people I have talked to have reconnected with somebody from their past? Because people always think it's just Mercury in retrograde, but Mars too. So they really might be hooking up with somebody.
Right, right, literally.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So
I agree. And then I'm trying to think, okay, so with Juno, the next one is Juno in Cancer. Okay,
right.
so Juno in Cancer. I've had a significant relationship with a Juno in Cancer, and they were very much like serial monogamous,
Mhm.
like really, I think looking for that more emotional, like motherly kind of connection, the nurturer, someone who could care for them. But also, I could see how Juno in Cancer could be someone who has a shadow side of maybe caring, or like doting on their partner too much, or like becoming their mother, and
A little smother. Yeah.
smothering, yeah, the smothering mothering kind of thing, with Juno in Cancer. But also I will say that I feel like with that specific Juno and Cancer person I dated, there was definitely like a fear of intimacy there. And I wonder if that's because the emotions ran like so deep, if it was like, okay, like I can't surrender to these emotions, or I can't necessarily feel all of this at once if I don't entirely trust this person, what do you get from Juno and
I
Cancer?
I agree with you totally. And again, this has to do with the fourth house is emotional security. It's the very foundation of your chart. And so Juno and Cancer very much relates to that. They are always about emotional security. That's number one to them. You know what I mean? Can they trust you? Can they? And they're always nurturing and encouraging to keep that bond going. They take the lead. We talk about Aries being the hunter. Cancer is the emotional one. They're going after you. They're always going to want to know your emotions. They're always going to want to stay emotionally connected.
Oh,
So
yes. And this Juno and Cancer person, huge, huge issue with staying reconnected with their exes. Like the exes never went away. There was always this emotional connection there, which also ultimately kind of led to the ending of the connection between me and them, because I'm a Venus in Capricorn, and I'm like,
you're
if
like
it's,
boundaries.
yeah, I'm like, if it's done, man. Like, let's cut this off. But yeah, so maybe that could be another shadow of a Juno and Cancer, or Juno and water in general.
Right.
Maybe like, you know, sometimes a little bit too connected to the past at times, or whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
because it's always flowing. Water never stops flowing. You know what I mean? That's
yeah,
the thing about water. That's why it's so important to get to the elemental part of these,
yeah,
signatures, because
yeah.
that informs everything. So yeah.
Do you think with Juno in the fourth house now, like, is this are we going to go as literal as you're marrying someone who's like a real estate broker or something?
Well, and how setting up a home, no matter what kind of home it is,
Oh,
it
good
doesn't
point.
matter if it's a
Oh,
yurt or if it's, an Airstream trailer or, a mansion. You want a home, and home is where the heart is, right? Like I said, I was more married to my person in my heart. That person I think of, no matter where they live, is has my heart. You know what I mean? Like but I am all water. So anyway, go on. But yeah,
yeah.
but that thing about the security thing, Juno in the fourth house, woof, and then not gonna you gotta go there. Those are the parental houses, fourth and 10th. So perhaps the partner reminds you of a parent. You never know. And it could be either parent, you know what I mean? So there's something parental, like you said, the nurturing, the mothering, in the fourth
Right.
and the
I'm
10th.
thinking also about how yeah, Juno in the fourth house. I mean, inheritance is also an eighth house thing, but I wonder if, like, for whatever reason, they live in the house that they inherited from their parents, or like there's something
Totally.
about ancestral property or something along those lines that comes through, that now you live on their ancestors' land. There's something.
That's pretty cool. Well, and also your emotional inheritance, generational trauma, that kind of stuff, that's all in the basement of your chart. You know what
Oh,
I mean? And plug it in. So you better if I would say to anybody who's dating someone with Juno in the fourth house, make sure you know all about their family before you
yeah.
plug into that.
Oh, yeah, there might be. Oh, you're right. There might be an especially a feeling of Jesus Christ, like you're married to the person, you're married to their family. Like that might be especially true.
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
My first partner was Venus in Cancer, and he literally lives with his mom and grandma now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's Venus in Cancer, not Juno. But I'm just saying that you
Right.
get the same, you can use these things. If you're just now starting to learn Juno, you can understand what Venus means. You can understand what Pisces, you'd understand all these things and apply them. So yeah.
Totally. Okay. So fifth house Juno, we've got the Juno in Leo. I don't know. I'm thinking like a hype, like the hype man. Like this is a person who really needs their person to support them. Like they need, if this person has a partner, and let's say they have a dance recital or an
Yeah.
art show or a presentation at work. Like they want their partner to show up
Exactly.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, Juno and Leo. I mean, if you have Juno and Leo, you want your partner to be a star and reflect as you need a good-looking, beautiful, dynamic. You know what I mean. They need to make you look good. Your partner. You know what I mean. And yeah. So that's
I
the thing. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I can kind of understand that as like a Mars in Leo. As like I want, not that I want my partner to like be this like
Yeah.
ultra attractive person, but I don't mind the feeling of like walking down the street holding hands with someone cute, like like that feels good to
Right.
me.
Yeah. Well, and then, and then just let's be literal, like somebody that's radiant, somebody that's, um, has star power, who's attractive, magnetizing, passionate and devoted because, Leo's fixed. Once
Yep.
they got their eye on you, you know what I'm saying? So you're wanting that devoted passion from your partner.
Yeah, truly someone who what does Lady Gaga say? She's like, "Oh, there could be a million people in the room, but all you need is one." Like
Right. Yeah.
I'm butchering
I
that.
remember that quote too. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That movie star that Lady Gaga was in with
Yep.
Bradley
A Star is
Cooper.
Born. Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's very Juno and Leo. Because they both are seeing each other's star power.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. And again, back to the power dynamic. You
Yeah,
know, once one
they're
lifted, one was a dying star, one was a rising star. And this transfer of power, like and it was
Now
something
that I
else.
think about it, Lady Gaga must have a pretty strong Juno because her other movie about the Gucci House of Gucci or whatever, same thing. She played this wife, but was like the main character and the family dynamics and the power and killing
Yeah.
her husband. And I hate to spoiler alert, but yeah,
Well, and I know way too much about this, but she was engaged to a Capricorn when she was doing that movie, and they broke up, and her leading man in A Star is Born was Bradley Cooper, who was a Capricorn. So she's got this Capricorn energy. So I forget, we should go look it up, but it'd be funny to see if she has Juno and Capricorn.
yeah, it totally
Because again, because I said it's not just who you marry, it's who you are deeply connected to. Your teacher, parent, whatever it is,
So with Juno, okay, so that's Juno and Leo, but Juno in the fifth house, are we thinking, well,
someone you
it's married or partnered with an artist, a creative, a dancer, a musician, someone who has a lot of creative potential, a writer, also potentially someone who really wants to have your babies.
That's exactly it. Somebody wants to have kids because kids are creations, right? Yeah. And that for them, it'd be very rewarding, and that is a perfect Juno container because Juno was about fertility. So Juno in the fifth house is happy. They can do their creative fertility thing there,
Yeah. Yeah.
that sacred
Uh,
container.
I would be interested though, like in the sense of if anybody has this, like Juno in the fifth house with like I don't know, like square to Pluto or conjunct the South Node, or there's some harder aspect to Juno in the fifth house. I'd be interested to see if there were like a complicated relationship to becoming a parent, or maybe some challenges when it comes to being a parent or whatever. I would be interested to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what's next?
Sixth house.
Sixth house. Okay. All right. So I have Juno in the sixth house. But I'll let you speak on that first,
Okay.
Denise.
Well, so I guess we're going to start with Juno and Virgo, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Juno and Virgo, it's Earth sign, it's ruled by Mercury, right? So again, you want someone who's, you're looking for a partner who you can be practical, so somebody you can strategize with. The sixth house, if we're going to talk about what Virgo rules, is the day to day. You want someone who's just right in there with you, who is part of you, because the same habits as you, the same rituals, the same patterns. Joking about when you have, I mean, not that Juno and Virgo is a slave, but I mean, they want to serve their partner. They want someone, sometimes they might go for someone who needs their help. I'm not saying it's codependent, but they might go for someone who needs them because they want to be needed, So
Totally. I agree. I think for me with Juno in the sixth house, like my main love language is definitely quality time. So and it's not necessarily like, oh, I need this big extravagant date planned every night, but it's more like invite me to go to the grocery store with you, or invite me to
Yeah,
run.
that can be so romantic. That's a
Right.
perfect Juno in the sixth house thing. Let's go do our day-to-day stuff together, you know,
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm thinking with Juno in Virgo, you're right. Virgo is the healer archetype. So maybe a little bit careful, being careful with you know, partnering with people who maybe you are attracted to your potential to change them, or your potential to heal them, and that could go wrong in some ways. But at the same time, Juno and Virgo could be a relationship that is mutually focused on health and well-being, and maybe you both are getting healthier together, or doing a juice cleanse together, or I don't know, like doing some kind of exercise together or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of also talked about, having Juno in the sixth is that, if we use this concept of being committed or married, what are you married to? Because there are people, we talked about this, who don't. It's funny because Virgo's the sign of the Bachelor. What if you're never going to get married? What if you don't want to get married? What does Juno represent then? It's like what you're married to. And sometimes if there's Juno in the sixth house, you might be married to your work and the service that you're providing. And it's funny, going back to all the way to the first house, I was thinking about how I never wanted to get married and I would married myself. Right. I
Mm.
should, really, that's a first house thing. So a sixth house thing would be like, maybe you're married to your work. Maybe you're married to yourself. Maybe you're married to, whatever else, all these different things. If you go around the chart, if you don't put it in terms of a person, what would you be married to? Like,
Oh, 100%. I'm 100% married to my work. And if a partner seems like they don't understand my work, or doesn't, or thinks it's like silly or frivolous, or just like, oh, Frida, she's doing her astrology stuff, like it's like immediate no for me. I'm like, no, you don't see that this is like a service for me. This is like a spiritual devotion. You need to know that, this is my first and foremost partner, and now you're in a relationship with both
me, you, and astrology.
me in astrology, and that can be a lot, which is why I'm thinking I need to marry eventually another astrologer.
Yes, I know. Well, okay. And I'm really glad we brought up this point because people will say if you have Juno in the 10th house, you're married to your career, but you put the point on this. This is more than a career to you. This is your vocation. This is your service, I don't forget, just how you are operating in the world. I mean, this is what you do. You're giving back. This is your purpose.
Yes,
So, yes.
exactly. Okay, Juno in the seventh house feels kind of obvious, but maybe there's a shadow side with that, because yeah, now we're thinking Juno in the seventh house, Juno in Libra. Not that they're entirely the same thing, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a shadow side to maybe the desire for partnership. Not that that is an inherently bad thing, because I think humans, we are psycho spiritual social animals. We need relationships, but I do wonder, yeah, Juno in the seventh house, how much of your time is spent in relationships, and how many of those relationships are actually aligned, or if it's just being in a relationship for the sake of wanting to be in a relationship because that's your comfort zone. Uh,
Yeah.
but tell us, Denise, a little bit about, yeah, Juno in Libra, like the partner that might be attracted.
Right. Well, it's interesting, just going back to the house, is to Juno and Libra, never not having a partner, because Libra is the only inanimate sign in the zodiac. And in order to feel human, they have to have their counterbalance.
Ooh, good
So you
point.
can't hardly fault Juno and Libra, Juno seventh house. You know what I mean? Like, you need a partner. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You are seen as one half of the other. But going back to Juno and Libra, I think let's go back to what rules Libra is Venus. They need a beautiful partner. They need a gracious partner. They need someone who is socially adaptable. They need somebody who's fair. I think of like George Clooney. I don't know what his thing is, but when you look at Amal, she's a lawyer, for God's sake. She's a Libra. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what his is, but I'm just like, that's who I think of when I think of a Juno and Libra partner is Amal Clooney. She like embodies all the Libra stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally.
Gracious, all that stuff. So
yeah. The other thing I'm thinking about maybe with the lesson in Juno and Libra is like, this is what I'm finding with a lot of Libra placements that I've been talking to lately, like the sort of talent or skill to harmonize other things, other people, other situations, being also sometimes a disharmonizing thing to yourself. So like if you're trying to break up a fight and then you break it up, but in the sort of journey of it all, you get punched in the face and now you have a black eye.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have something to say about this because if you're always trying to keep the peace, guess what happens? You create resentment. That's the shadow side. Okay. And guess who knows this totally? Because her South Node is in Libra. In all these past lives, I kept my mouth shut. In this life, I'm sticking it up for myself, like, so again, going back to these, you just look at everything, all these different parts of your chart. So I understand that about the shadow side of a peacemaker or harmony at all costs.
Oh,
right?
yeah. My mom
conflict just puts the conflict down the road further.
Oh, definitely. My fourth house is in Libra. My mom needs every single dust particle harmonized in the home. Totally grew up in the house where nobody was allowed over unless it was completely spotless. And, she has a huge problem with the amount of resentment she carries. And she just, I mean, it's horrible. I don't, and it's because she needs to harmonize everything, and quote unquote, no one's helping her enough, or everybody's messing up her harmonization, which is kind of this Libra thing. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much.
There is a lot.
We could talk all day on each one of these placements.
It's
just so hard to just do short shrift on them, but we'll keep going. We're getting there.
Okay, sorry guys. We'll keep going. Well, we're doing okay. We're not quite.
We're doing good. And this was the most important one. The 7th house in Libra is all about partnership. We're talking about Juno. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have Juno in Scorpio.
Yes.
What are we feeling with this one, Denise?
This intense emotional fixed connection, right? And it's the depths, right? The peak experiences. They want somebody they can go there with, that, that'll go to literally hell and back with them. And if I just may point out, there's a very famous couple who the man has Juno and Scorpio and the woman has Juno and Libra, and that is Kim and Kanye. Kanye has Juno and Scorpio. He's intense. He's emotional. He's got his issues. You know what I mean? And he is taking her to hell and back. And she's like, oh, hell no. Juno and Libra, she wants harmony. She's all about beauty. She's Libra. And her partner, she can't handle this anymore. She cannot balance. This is not going to work.
Totally. Kanye showing like the very, very shadowy side of like Scorpio, Juno and Scorpio, which is like emotional manipulation, emotional abuse, when you can no longer control your partner or whatnot.
That's exact control. He wants to control her. He wanted to control her in a relationship. He stalks her, the stuff he said. I mean, that is the shadow side. You exactly put your finger on it. So, but the good side is somebody who can completely enmesh and mold, merge with that. I mean, that is where marriage actually takes place. The legal part takes place in the 7th house, the merging of your finances, your sexuality, and all of that. And so they say that Juno really has so much to do with Libra and Scorpio, the Libra and Scorpio houses, that is as much as you know about Libra and Scorpio will inform your Juno. So the themes are very similar.
I love that point. And Juno in the 8th house, I'm thinking there are some ties with Juno in the 4th house. Like maybe your partner has inherited maybe your partner has a daddy Warbucks, has inherited some money. Maybe your partner has some kind of real estate or something that they are kind of receiving in this lifetime. However, I think Juno in the 8th house could be maybe even sometimes the opposite. My partner has a lot of difficulties with money and now they're in a lot of debt, and I don't know how to partner with them, because in order to combine resources with them, then that puts me in debt, and I don't know, maybe there's some kind of debt thing, or maybe there's a partner that was previously married and now they're going through a divorce and you want to be with them, but they have so much child support, so you guys can't buy a house together. This is an everyday example that I hear
Yeah.
about in client
Yeah.
sessions. So I'm wondering about that and Juno in the eighth house.
Yeah, that you'd be willing to take on your partner's issues. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because you do marry their issues and their karma. That's
Yeah.
another thing too. So that's the eighth house is death too. So like, this whole concept of all of it together is like yeah. The
Yeah.
whole to death do us part, I think it's the Scorpio part.
Totally.
Because they are ride or die. They want that ride or die relationship,
Yeah.
and that might be one where the person struggles, whether they're unhappy or not, with the power dynamic, because power control is a big eighth house thing. So
Yeah, in a higher one tiny thing in a higher frequency, I wonder about like the sexual healing and the sexual exploration that can go along with either having Juno in Scorpio or having a partner with Juno in Scorpio, like the sense of transmuting sexual shame into sexual pleasure.
the ability to explore taboos together. There is a freedom in
Yep.
that, too. They're fearless in some ways. They're going to go there. They're going to dig it out of you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like there's so no,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I actually love the eighth house because I'm Mars
Oh,
and Scorpio. I love the eighth house.
yeah. No, I'm eighth house moon. When you put me
Oh, totally. You
so
know this.
I know. Okay, ninth house stuff.
Yeah.
So this is Juno and Sag. So we both have Juno and Sag, so we can probably speak to this. I will say Juno and Sag for me is in a very literal way, like I am literally looking for who wants to travel the world with me. Who is going to be my travel buddy. I will likely, I can't, I'm not God, I can't predict everything, but I will likely trade having a traditional family with children for just being able to travel more freely. So yeah, who will travel with me? Also, Juno and Sag, if you don't have a spiritual practice or you're not spiritually working on yourself in some way, it's kind of a turn off to me. I'm like, okay, like what do you even, I don't know. What do you think about that, Denise?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you put your finger on that because I'm always thinking that way. I'm always thinking metaphysical. I'm always thinking big worldly thoughts. And I always, of course, I want adventure and I want exploration, emotional, mental, and physical exploration. I want to do all of it. And my first partner, which is kind of crazy because we have Juno in our composite chart in the ninth house, and I met him in college.
Okay.
His family expanded my world, but he was really sprung down. And he was an atheist. Everything was like, it is what it is, whatever. Whereas my second partner was very spiritual. We were very connected. We read each other's minds. And that is what kept that going over distance and time. We had a long distance relationship. So, you know what I'm saying? I was willing, as a Juno and Sag, to have a long distance relationship if I was emotionally and spiritually connected to this person.
Ooh,
Didn't
yeah.
matter if we were physically in the same place. So
I wonder with Juno and Sag if people or Juno in the ninth house, if these people are more likely to enter into a long distance relationship,
yeah.
or I don't know, beyond like what's that one reality show like 90 Day Fiance or whatever, like someone who
Yeah.
you don't know the person, but you're speaking at a distance. I also think going into the ninth house, yeah, this is someone who you might be meeting in college or in like an adult computer class or like a yoga class, an astrology class. You are maybe meeting them with some sort of shared knowledge, pursuit of knowledge. I also though want to say, I wonder if some Juno in the ninth house people maybe have some karma with like being priests or taking like vow of chastity or something in a past lifetime, because the
That's
ninth house does have to do with religion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my friend who I told you who has Juno and Taurus, she has it in the ninth house. She is a college professor, but she met her second husband at a Course in Miracles retreat, and they're both in AA together. So these spiritual things, right?
Ah,
And she has Saturn in Taurus, and he's 9 years older than her. So she's got an older partner who she met in a spiritual thing, you know what I mean, who is very traditional. You know, I mean, it's just so like when you put those pieces together of like, where they met, what they're looking for, the planets conjunct to. It's just crazy how this
It
world
really
works.
is. Oh, I can't. And if you're watching on YouTube, comment below if any of this is resonating. And me and Denise would love to hear your Juno stories. But let's get into we have three more. So let's get into the 10th house
Yeah,
/ Juno and Capricorn. Um,
right.
you know what? I will say, um, shout out to Rick Levine, who taught me and Denise at OPA's conference that Capricorn is the sexiest sign. If you ever get a chance to talk to an astrologer, Rick Levine, about why Capricorn's the sexiest sign, it's a good thing. I won't get into it, but I will say I think Juno in Capricorn is like kind of like the BDSM, like power dynamic, kind of like daddy kind of thing.
Oh, and talk about repression. We always talk about it's the hardest part or whatever. You're,
Right.
business on top, what is it, whatever in the streets, freaking
Yeah,
sheets, whatever it
yeah.
is. They are, yeah, exactly. There is a power dynamic with Juno and Capricorn for sure.
It is
And
like it's 50 Shades of Gray, like Juno and
right.
Capricorn.
And I
Yeah.
could say my first partner had Juno and Capricorn. So he was looking for a Capricorn. He found a Capricorn partner, me. And
Right.
I was the stable and the da da da. But guess what he meant? He wanted to be in control. I was a formidable opponent for him. You know what I'm saying? I had my shit together. He didn't. He wanted what I had, and his way of doing that was dragging me down. That he got
Hmm.
off on that.
Hmm.
Every
Yeah.
success, you know what I mean? It was a crazy power dynamic. So, but it wasn't in the 10th house, it was in the ninth. But anyway, go on. Yeah.
Well,
But I know I was with and can I also say this when you said this about power dynamic? Both of my relationships were Juno and Capricorn relationships. Long
wow.
term, Saturn, devoted, power plays, the whole thing. It was who's in charge. We were always battling for who's in charge of this relationship.
Okay. Okay.
But that's in the composite chart. But anyway, back to the 10th
What do you
house.
think? What do you think the higher frequency of Juno and Capricorn is? Like people who really can create a very stable, long term, like I've been married for 80 years kind of thing.
Yeah, empire building, I like to call it. I wanted that. I was bought into that. That was the plan, but it didn't come to fruition. But that's the thought that they're carrying. Yeah. He's very much about, the boys and his sons and the da 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 da. Even though he didn't do anything. I'm saying like that is in his, I was his Juno. I produced those kids for him.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
yeah. His
And
legacy, his team. Yeah.
I don't have Juno in Capricorn. I already said I had Juno in Sag, but as a Venus in Capricorn, I really relate to that, like the sort of fantasy of building like a really long-term thing and then it being really crushing when it doesn't work out as long-term as we wanted it to be. And I'm sure there's a deep down part of me that really wishes like, oh, I could have just met the one and we could be together for 120 years and blah, blah, blah,
Ah.
you know? Uh, what about Juno placed in the 10th house? Do you think that's like I'm attracted to people who are successful, or I'm attracted to public figures, or my husband is the mayor, or my wife is the vice president? What do you think?
Right. Well, and going back to being married to your career, that's really like their public eyes, the status. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jackie Onassis, part of her stuff was a 10th house thing because, she was married to Aristotle Onassis, who was a Capricorn and had a ton of money. So, you know what I mean? She went from the philandering president, who was a big power guy, to this guy who had a ton of money worldwide, whatever. So that's what I kind of get at is like somebody for whom status is a big thing,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
seen in the world it's actually a really good placement. Juno in the 10th house is a good placement for a long-term marriage because Capricorn, it's Saturn ruled. And being on the same, having a plan, having the same goals, because the 10th house is goals. So the second house, there's a lot of good placements for Juno, but that's one of the really good ones. First and 10th are the good ones.
Okay.
The
Okay.
identity of your relationship, the way world sees you.
Okay. And then, okay, so now we have Juno in Aquarius, / Juno in the 11th house. I'm thinking if you have Juno in the 11th house, your odds of meeting someone through the grapevine, being set up on a blind date by friends, really talk to your connections when it comes to manifesting partnerships, right?
Right. Well, I can tell you because my second partner was a Juno in Aquarius. He loved unconventional, wacky, of course he's like me, what I'm saying? So I'm saying he didn't want a normal life. He said that from the get-go. I don't want a normal life. And he wanted freedom. He wanted to be able to, he acted like he was a single person all the time. I was just like along for the ride. I was his friend. But really, he was following me. You know what I mean? I was the one providing all the entertainment, Juno and Sag. You know what I mean? Like, or whatever. But what I'm saying is, I think the Juno and Aquarius never wants to give up their freedom. And they really just want a friend. And that's what he's over and over again. He wants, the bottom line for his partnership is friendship.
Maybe, maybe that is a good point for, Juno and Aquarius slash Juno in the 11th house. Like that foundation of friendship is the most important thing. And maybe there is a story for some Juno and Aquarius people about like, we were friends for 10 years and then we started get married, or who, I'll have to check Mindy Kaling's chart, but you know how she has that long-term friendship with is it BJ Novak?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so these are two people who comedians who were on The Office, right? And Mindy Kaling is, best friends with this person, and he's also the father of her children through like sperm donation. And they like dated one time, but now they still claim that they're just friends. But I just feel like it's so Juno in Aquarius, like, okay, this long-term friendship, like, come on, like, is it like we're all rooting for it to become a relationship, right?
Right, exactly. And also that's unconventional. Look how unconventional that is.
It
That's
is
a modern unconventional situationship, whatever you want to call it.
right.
Yeah.
But as I hear myself say that too, I will note that I notice I just put like romantic relationships on a hierarchy above platonic relationships. And I think that's something that, Juno and Aquarius could potentially help us shift out of, where it comes into like, okay, like what is platonic love? Can I like platonically cuddle someone? Can my friendships be my partner? Who says I can't marry my friend and buy a house with my friend? Like, why does it always have to be a romantic connection?
Yeah, like communes, like, and like you were just saying, like married to your friend group. You're devoted. You get all you need from all your friends in your friend group because it's the
Yes.
11th house, right? Also, I wanted to mention, shout out to Colin Bedell, who did a post on stable ambiguity, how more and more modern relationships, they don't have a label. You can't pinpoint the label, but you're consistently hanging with these people, right? So his phrase was stable ambiguity. And that's what I think of when I think of Juno in the 11th house, is that it's never going to have a name. It's probably unconventional. It's outside the box, whatever. Maybe it's open. Who knows what it is? But you consistently keep coming back to this.
Ooh.
Aquarius is fixed, right? The idea, you know what I mean? It's fixed.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, thank you, Colin Bedell, for coining that phrase. That's really helpful, actually. And now we go into Juno in the 12th house. Juno in Pisces.
Yeah. I
One
love it. Okay, let's do Juno and Pisces first, and then we'll get to the 12th. How's that?
Okay, so Juno in Pisces, this is someone, the most lovey-dovey of them all, I think, but also the person who's most likely to get a little bit too energetically enmeshed in their partner and maybe have a little bit of a challenge with balancing their life when they do have a romantic partnership or are in love. It's just like, oh, that's like the only thing that matters. And I'm thinking about just the compassion and the vulnerability and the selflessness that can come through with Juno in Pisces. What do you get from Juno in Pisces?
Well, I pulled this up, Juno and Pisces, because we're all experiencing it right now. We're
Yeah.
all getting a taste of what people who are Juno and Pisces have in their relationships. And so it says, instead of addressing our issues or working through problems, Juno and Pisces can encourage us to forgive and forget, if this is done excessively, there might not be any progress in a relationship. So bad habits and other tendencies may persist instead of being nipped in the bud. Connecting on a spiritual level transcends the mundane. So there's this sort of like, forget the world and all the whatever, the practical. So think about Juno and Virgo, who wants to take care of the details of the daily life. The Juno and Pisces would run off and live on a boat and be happy and spiritually connected and enmeshed and all this other stuff, but it doesn't last very long because it doesn't, there's this ephemeral quality to the Juno and Pisces unless it can be grounded. And I feel this because I have Venus in Pisces. Even though Venus in Pisces is an exaltation, my automatic thing is to see their humanness and to have empathy for them and then not address the issue and then become like Juno and become resentful and poison the water hole with not addressing the issue by spiritually bypassing everything that comes that way out of in the name of love, which is not responsible.
Yeah, I could definitely see like a Juno in Pisces, maybe being partnered to someone who has a problem with some kind of addictive personality, or maybe has some kind of emotional problem, and just kind of like la di da di da, like I'm just gonna not look at that for a while, and
Right.
and
Denial, huge.
yeah,
And so if we're going to evolve now to the Juno and the 12th, illusion is a huge part. It's your what's in your subconscious. You're seeing what you're projecting. So 12 Juno in the 12th house relationships, same with Sun in the 12th house relationships. There's an element of the dream or the ideal. And seriously, I call it, the rose-colored glasses, but let's be real, it's beer goggles, basically, because you are drunk on love. You know what I mean? There's this illusionary quality to it, you
yeah,
know?
addicted to love. Yeah,
Addicted to love, totally. So, but
and
spiritual also, you
right,
know.
right. The ancient astrologers said that the 12th house, they related the 12th house to places that were kind of like on the outskirts of society. So like it could be a prison, it could be a monastery, the places that are in kind of isolation, or
An
uh,
ashram, an asylum, all these places.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
So I wonder if, for whatever reason, maybe that's somehow involved in your significant other's life. Like maybe they work at a psychiatric hospital, or maybe they uh are in prison, where I don't know, maybe you're writing love letters to them in prison. I mean, honestly, I'm kidding, but I think that if we were to look at some of those people really do write letters to these, so like, serial
Yes.
in prison. And
Perfect.
you know, I would not be surprised if Juno was in those people's 12th house, or something with Pisces was going on with that.
Exactly. No, that's a perfect example of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It fits all the needs of those. Yeah. And it's unrealistic. That's the other thing. It's a dream. It's not really a real relationship. You know what I mean?
exactly. Because distance often helps us maintain the illusion.
You would, oh my gosh, you need to, yes, look, that's a quote. Pull that out. That is exactly it. Distance helps us maintain the illusion for
Uh,
sure. Oh my goodness. We did pretty good. We made it through all 12 of them.
we made it. Oh my gosh, this was so great. Do you feel what if I did this, Denise, to kind of wrap up our episode here? I'm gonna pull a tarot card, and let's see if Juno has any messages for us. And you can also tune in, and we'll just ask the cards and the universe right now for the highest messages from Juno currently. Currently it is December 8th, 2022. Juno is at 15 degrees Pisces, squaring that full moon in Gemini. Let's ask if there's anything else that Juno wants to share with us today. Um, okay. Ooh, okay. So we have the Judgment card. Dun dun dun. Yes,
Discernment. Look at that right away, Juno and Pisces. We just got done talking about that. That's crazy. Okay.
right,
Yes.
right. So I mean, the Judgment card is the most blaring calling of the deck. Like this is literally what's the chapter in the Bible, Denise, where the Revelations.
Oh, okay.
That
Yeah.
that is what this card is depicting. Like it's like the dead rising from
Oh,
the horn blown
wow.
by Angel Gabriel, I think is the one who blows the horn. But it's this like dun 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 moment where it's like, wow, I've seen the thing, I've seen the wound, I've seen something from a new light. Now, if I don't change it, I will be in a state of cognitive dissonance, Uh, so yeah, anything that you kind of feel about this
Oh my
vibe?
gosh. I think that totally goes with the moon and the Mars because our emotions sometimes overshadow our mental, like our head, right? And
Right.
Mars is like, have the courage to face the facts.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
Juno and Pisces wants the higher love, it wants to transcend the mundane, but we have to go beyond our beliefs, Sagittarius, so what we think our relationship should be like. Look at the facts of our relationship. Yes, we want the higher good. It's yes, have empathy and compassion, but bring it all together to balance it all out. So
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, Denise, of course, I'll probably have already stated this in the introduction, and I'll have all of your info in the show notes, but what's going on with you with your, business? Can people book with you? Where are you located? All of that stuff. Give us your plugs.
well, so my website is starsonlineastro.com, and you'll get my whole story on there and my booking and all that stuff. In terms of events, this was my most current one. I recently just did a talk about relationships for an astrology group in Illinois. So I did a Zoom call. So, but my goal is, like we talked about, is to get out in the new year. I have one, it's not firm, but I have one sex toy shop in Palm Desert that I'm supposed to be doing a Mars and Venus talk called Sextrology, and just in time for Valentine's Day. It's part of their Valentine's Day promotion. So I'm very excited about that. Like I said, that to me is a fun way to connect astrology with the general public in a way that is actually really important. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to in the new year.
I don't know if this is an official offering of yours yet, but recently you kind of gave me a forensic
Yeah.
relational astrology reading. Do you want to talk a little bit about that off?
Oh, I would love that. And I think I'm going to repackage some of the things that I have on my website since our talk. What I find is with people, they'll ask me, they'll be start dating and they'll be like, first of all, a lot of times they're not over their person. So this forensic idea is that let's go back and look at the chart of the last person and see where you connected. This is literally how I started astrology. I wanted to find out where I connected with my person and where I didn't, and to come to understand it. And I think once you get past that, we dig that up and you sit with it. Then when you get in the dating world, we can really, really focus on you. And then I was talking about maybe doing a package where you could send me, each new person that you date, if you want to send me their info, you want to give it some time. If there's somebody you are clicking with, then we can look before you make the next steps. It was like, is this got some long-term possibilities if you're interested in long-term?
Yes.
So anyway, so
cool.
Yeah.
Well,
but I
yeah.
think the forensic thing is a very healing type of
It was so healing, my friend. So if anybody's listening and is having a really hard time with like a closing of a relationship, or just like, moving past a breakup, or wanting to get back out there, but still feeling a little bit scarred from like a past relationship or whatever, this like forensic astrology reading that Denise gave me was super healing. So reach out to her with that if you are looking for that kind of reading.
Thanks, Mal. Yeah, I had a great
Cool.
time. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. And thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.